Is inductive validity irreducible to deductive validity? This is strictly optional, by the way. Here's an argument that attempts to show just that. First premise, there's a purely formal theory of deductive reasoning. If inductive reasoning could be reduced to deductive reasoning, there'd be a purely formal theory of inductive reasoning. But there's no purely formal theory of inductive reasoning. That's what we've just taken from discussion of this notion of GRU, Goodman's new riddle. So inductive reasoning cannot be reduced to deductive reasoning. Conclusion. So there's an argument, but is that argument any good? With your lecture buddies, take 90 seconds and try to work out, which premise is false or which step from premises to conclusion goes wrong. What's wrong with this argument, if anything? 90 seconds, go. I wonder where you got with this. I want to suggest to you that the first premise is likely to be false. I think the problem with this argument is that we don't have a purely formal theory of deductive reasoning, and there are some good reasons to think that we're unlikely to get one. So for that reason, I would say we can't make this argument work. We can't make this argument work because we can't capture deductive reasoning in full generality by appeal to purely formal methods. Now, that's not to say, of course, that we can't get a long way with purely formal methods. One of the great things about the 20th century and early 21st century is just how much has been discovered about how far formal methods can take us. Fabulous. But of course, the big story was also about the limits of those purely formal methods. They don't capture the whole thing, although they might capture some interesting parts of it. So it seems to me that premise one is false, and therefore that the whole argument fails to be sound. We cannot accept the conclusion about inductive reasoning being irreducible to deductive reasoning. That being the case, we lack a general argument. What we need to do then is to check attempts to provide a reduction. What does it look like? Well, here's a good candidate. What Godfrey Smith calls the Jackson-Pargeter-Burgess analysis. And what you see here, I'm not going to go through this. If you're interested in this rather advanced topic, I encourage you to read Godfrey Smith's paper and have a look at the analysis and the attempt to analyse it. But what you see here essentially are a couple of premises and a conclusion where the idea is that the premises are getting us close to providing deductive support for the conclusion. Now, I'm not saying that we're already there yet. I'm not saying that this particular example is fully acceptable, but I am saying that I wouldn't want to put money on the impossibility of somebody coming up with some implicit premises that, together with a very standard inductive premise, provide deductive support for a conclusion. Do I think then that inductive validity can be reduced to deductive validity? I don't think it can, right? I think that it's unlikely that someone will come up with a really convincing reduction. On the other hand, I'm still putting this question down as a maybe, because I haven't seen any reason to think that it can't be done either.